I don't know if you can tell, but I am actually quite a big fan of the TV show Doctor Who. I've got a Doctor Who poster over there and a couple in that room, and I've got a life-size TARDIS. I really do like the show, but recently there have been a few problems with the TV show, particularly in sexism towards women, so I'm here to basically talk about those issues and what they are and why they're problems. So part of it is that almost every woman on the show has been written pretty much the same ever since Moffat became the writer. They're skinny, they're attractive, they fall in love with the Doctor, or at least flirt with him. You know, they're very sexy, they're usually in a position of power, but they're willing to give that up as soon as the Doctor comes in and swoon away with him. And they often exist just to interact with the Doctor. So you have Clara, River Song, etc., etc. So Clara even mentions in the Truth Field in the Regeneration episode how she only ran away with the Doctor because she fancies him. Because that's all she is as a character, right? A sidekick and a love interest to the Doctor. The Doctor can also pretty much mistreat the female characters at any time, and they never call him out or do anything about it. He can lie to Clara twice and leave her behind, and ignore her in favor of literally anyone else. And she will never point it out or tell him, hey, that's kind of shitty of you. I know he did this with Rose as well, but a large part of the story was about Rose using her power to get back, whereas with Clara, we just don't know. She's just pushed aside to let the Doctor save the day, as always. He can literally scream at her about how she's a mystery and she's lying to him even though she isn't and she has no idea what's going on. And this is portrayed as okay, she has no problem with this, and the audience has no problem with this, so that's one problem. Moffat also writes the Doctor as like really sexist, and this is treated as funny and okay. He can kiss a woman who is married and is a lesbian, she can slap him, and he can make a joke about how good it felt to kiss her, and this is treated as okay. He can kiss a woman, Tasha, without her asking, and when she tells him he should maybe ask for consent before kissing her, he makes a joke about it and doesn't apologize, and this is okay. He can slap Clara's ass and laugh about it naked in front of her whole family without telling her, and that's okay too. The Doctor also seems to have this thing of needing to be there for his female companions when they're little girls, because it's impossible to have a female character on this show whose life hasn't been revolving around the Doctor ever since she was like 8. So Amy has been waiting for the Doctor since she was a little girl. The Doctor has been visiting Clara's life ever since she was a little girl. This isn't really portrayed as creepy on the show when it kind of is. River, you even see her as a little girl. It's like a really recurring trope, and it's kind of weird. It's really only with the female characters. More on the Doctor being sexist is how he reacts to traditional sexism, homophobia, etc., etc. So in the past, whenever 9 or 10 would be in a situation where someone was racist or sexist or otherwise bigoted, he would try and shed enlightenment. He'd try to teach the person why they were wrong and about more modern values. But nowadays, whenever the Doctor encounters bigotry in a traditionally bigoted time, he just kind of goes with it. So that gives you jokes like in The Bells of St. John, it's a woman. And this is hilarious, right? Actually, no, it's really not. And 99% of the time, the Doctor doesn't do anything to stop it, and that just makes me really uncomfortable. He even sometimes acts like these sexist people from the past, which is really not true to the spirit of the show. The 9th and the 10th Doctor would sometimes act shitty, but whenever they did, the companions would always call them out on it. When 9 was a dick to Jackie, Rose told him that it wasn't okay. When 10 ignored Martha to mourn Rose, Martha told him it wasn't okay and that it wasn't healthy for her, and she got out. The Doctor wasn't always right. He wasn't a god, he wasn't always in a situation where everyone knew who he was, and he didn't always act perfect. And when he did act like a jerk, people pointed it out to him, and that was okay. That was true to the show. I mean, it's not wrong inherently to have a character who is an asshole. It is inherently wrong to have a character who is an asshole who is portrayed as funny and being in the right. The women in modern Doctor Who also generally don't get to have a say over their storylines. Amy's pregnancy was kept from her, which is really creepy and just generally weird. And the female characters, aside from Amy, have little to no character development. Clara hasn't changed at all as a character from the first time we saw her. In the Regeneration episode, the Doctor is carrying around a Cyberman head. We really don't know why that is, but, I mean, Moffat's plot holes and bad storytelling are a different story, so. But the Cyberman gets more emotion and more character development in 50 minutes than Clara has gotten since the beginning of her appearance. Another one is River is falsely imprisoned in her cell for something she didn't do. The doctor could have helped her try and escape, trying to prove her innocence, but instead, whenever they come back from their little escapades, he returns her to her cell, which again leaves her passive and waiting for the doctor, again, with really no agency over herself. He even retcons Russell T Davies as good characters and actual historical figures to turn them into the same genetic cookie-cutter, strong female characters. And while I'm all for real strong female characters, Moffat's characters really aren't. They're pretty much all the same. For instance, Queen Elizabeth I in the 50th anniversary. In real life, she didn't really believe in love. She never really wanted to be married. I mean, she had this whole historical reason behind this, but on the show, she just turns into like this lovesick woman who is just waiting to be swept off her feet by the handsome doctor. The same thing happened with Rose. They brought back Billie Piper, who was a talented actress who played a really well fleshed out character, to be in the special. They could have brought her back as Rose, but instead they brought her back as a personification of the big red button, which Moffat seems to love so much, for really no reason other than to turn literally every character and every object into a strong, sexy, gorgeous Moffat girl. This is a recurring theme. The men on Doctor Who are allowed to be awkward, fat, unattractive, and flawed, and they can still be good and strong. Look at Craig Owens, for instance, or Rory Williams. But with the exception of Osgood, who is the only female character I can think of that doesn't follow this rule, every female character on the show is this idealized image of being strong and sexy, and that's just not realistic. Moffat-era Doctor Who female characters are not relatable. I won't go as far as to say that they're Mary Sue's, but they come pretty close. Even Jenny, who is supposed to be a strong lesbian character who is badass and like being amazing in Victorian London, has to be sexualized by the doctor, has to have shots panning up her legs because look at how sexy she is, guys. She has to have the doctor making boner jokes about her with his sonic screwdriver, which is something 9 and 10 would have never done, and it's just really uncomfortable. And you have Amy, who is supposed to be sassy and independent and a strong female character, is introduced as an adult by a shot that pans up her legs. The doctor calls her Legs as a nickname. Get it? Because she wears short skirts. So funny. And of course, there's nothing inherently wrong with having a sexy female character. It's important to know that sexuality in women is not inherently bad. It really is. But on Doctor Who, it's every single woman. And it's often treated as demeaning to those women. It's their defining characteristic. Amy isn't the angry ginger or a woman who stands up for herself. She's the Legs. And even when a character's sexuality is displayed in a positive way, it's still somewhat of a joke. Like, you have Jenny wearing a leather jacket. I mean, it's so badass, so cool, right? Only it's not, because immediately you have a shot panning up her legs and the doctor making a boner joke about her, so even that is killed. Then there's this whole idea of his female characters being girls. In the RTD era, the companions were women. Donna was the most important woman in the universe. Martha was the woman who walked the earth, and that was about their accomplishments. Martha saved the world from the Master. Donna saved the world from Davros and the Daleks. Meanwhile, Amy and Clara are girls. Clara is the impossible girl. Amy is the girl who waited. Neither of these are about their accomplishments. Both of these are about the Doctor and their relationships to the Doctor. Amy is the girl who waited passively for years for the Doctor to show up and save her. Clara is the girl that the Doctor couldn't figure out. Spoiler alert, she literally exists to save the Doctor. Multiple times. Her whole existence is about the Doctor. It's really infantilizing because these female characters apparently can't exist on their own without the Doctor, or some other man, and the Doctor is basically all they are. A good test to see if a character is a really good one or a really strong one is see how they would exist if you took the Doctor out of their lives, or whoever else their male love interest is. If you took the Doctor away from Rose, she still has a family who loves her and who we get to meet. She still has a strong characterization. She's still somebody who has specific desires, needs, and wants in her life. If you took the Doctor out of Martha's life, you'd still have a character who was a strong, badass woman who had drive and worked to better herself and the rest of the world. If you took Mickey out of her life, same thing. If you took the Doctor out of Donna's life, you'd still have a woman who had a hard life but was loud and wasn't afraid to be strong and stand up for herself, and had really good characterization. Now let's move on to the Moffat-era characters. If you took the initial concept of River out of the Doctor's life, you'd have a woman who was an archaeologist and who was a bit of a mystery, but had a pretty interesting character. But as the show progressed, her character started to become more and more to exist for the Doctor. So at this point, if you took the Doctor out of River's life, she'd be a woman who sat around in a cell doing nothing. If you took the Doctor out of Clara's life, you would have a teacher who sat around moping. If you took Rory out of Amy's life, 50% of her personality would be gone just like that. Finally, the female characters are ridiculously underdeveloped. I know I touched on this earlier with Clara, but the issue goes down really deeply, even to the point of what they do for their jobs. Rose works in a shop, and she doesn't like it, and this represents how she wants to get out of the tedium of her boring life. Even if her whole life was in danger, she would still prefer it to having to sit around working in a shop all day. Martha is in training to become a medical doctor. This represents her intelligence and her drive, and even if her life hasn't been completely easy, she doesn't give up, and she dedicates herself to learning. Donna is a temp worker, which shows how things in her life really haven't gone her way. She can't stick to one job for more than a couple of years. She doesn't really know what she wants in life yet. She's pressuring Lance into marriage because she knows that the older she gets, the more difficult it'll be for her to settle down. She's tired of life not going her way. Let's compare this to the career choices of Amy and Clara. Amy is a kissogram because she's pretty. Clara is a teacher because she likes kids. And what do we really learn about these women and what they do? We do see one family that Clara looks after, and besides that, we don't really see her doing her job at all, or any of her other life. How does her job affect her? How does she feel balancing real life and doctor life? Who knows? How did Clara become a teacher? For that matter, why does Clara not know how Wi-Fi works when she had to go to university to become a teacher? When you kind of have to know how to use a computer to go to university? No one knows. And then you've got Amy, who is basically the Barbie you buy in a store. And I don't mean in the sense of her physical appearance, but in her jobs. She's a kissogram, sometimes. She's a writer, if Moffat feels like it. She's a model all of a sudden, just because. And none of these ideas are given any exploration by Moffat. How does Amy feel about losing her child? Does she mourn her throughout all of season 7? We don't know. How does Amy feel about the fact that River is always favored over her, and the fact that she can't really trust anything the Doctor tells her? We don't know. How does Clara feel about being forced to go through the time vortex, which should have killed her like it killed Jack, just because the Doctor is favoring a little boy whom he just met over her? No clue. How does Clara feel about the fact that there are hundreds of copies of her out there, and she doesn't really know if she's the original one or the real one? No clue, not like the audience would care or anything. Doctor Who's female characters aren't people. They're mysteries for the Doctor to solve. Their storylines aren't theirs. Amy's pregnancy isn't about Amy. It's about the Doctor, figuring out how she got pregnant and what's going on with her. Who cares what Amy thinks about it? It's about the Doctor. River isn't a woman. She's, again, a mystery for the Doctor. What is she? Why did she regenerate? Those are questions that are answered because the Doctor wants to find out about this mystical creature. How does River feel about the Doctor mistreating her to the point of having to tell Amy, you never let him see the damage? Who cares? Clara isn't Clara, she's Oswin, she's Mary Poppins, she's been there for the Doctor since William Hartnell. Clara's Impossible Girl story arc really isn't Clara's. It's the Doctor's. It's about 11 figuring out what, not who, but what she is. So, in conclusion, 99% of Moffat's female characters are underdeveloped, sexualized, infantilized, falsely idealized, mistreated with no second thought, and have no agency of their own. And that's why I find the Doctor Who writing sexist. Thanks for watching.